Set in the 20th century Wild West, an innocent and naive teen embarks on a perilous journey to defeat a notorious outlaw just to rescue his sister. During the harsh winter in East Texas, a notorious masked outlaw, Cutthroat Bill, intrudes at a funeral ceremony to steal an expensive coat from the deceased. When the mourners notice the gun on his bolster, they become even more afraid of him, so they simply let him take the coat. On a nearby property, Jack, the Parker family's eldest son, digs a grave for their parents, as they have passed away due to smallpox. He then comforts his mournful sister, Lula, who's watching their parents on their deathbeds for the last time. Not long after, their grandfather, Caleb, arrives at their residence with their wagon, for they have to change houses. Lula immediately rushes to his arms and seeks comfort from his warmth. Upon recovering a Bible and necklace from them, Caleb burns the whole house to prevent the possible spread of the disease. As they make their way to Kansas, Caleb hands Jack a document, which entrusts him as his heir to a land called Wind River Range. Caleb informs him that his late father was supposed to be the inheritor, but due to their circumstance, he'll be managing it now. The following morning, the Parker family arrives at the ferry, but to their dismay, they encounter a group of outlaws. Their leader, a scarred-faced woman, demands a fare from Caleb, but he refuses to give her money. Annoyed, the leader tries to approach him to intimidate him, but her eyes fall in Lula's direction. She takes an immediate liking to the teen, but this only drives Jack to be protective of his sister. However, the leader is unafraid of him and even insists on approaching her. Caleb scrutinizes the woman, and he realizes that she's actually the infamous Cutthroat Bill. Bill wonders how he knows about her identity, and Caleb reveals that the Western Union is after her. Teasingly, Bill recounts that she has a $10,000 bounty on her, but Caleb ignores it. The outlaw then returns her attention to Lula and asks her if she can buy her. This time, Caleb loses his patience, so he pulls out his gun, but Bill catches his movement. For this reason, the bandits point their firearms at the lone man, outnumbering him. Unexpectedly, the ferry rope snaps, making Caleb think that one of them has fired a gun. Hence, the man is compelled to shoot Bill, and the bullet grazes her face. Infuriated at his actions, Bill unremorsefully shoots Caleb. Jack, driven in grief, tries to approach his grandfather, but one of the outlaws knocks him unconscious. Later that day, at a merchandise store, Bill orders the store owner to hand her the money and his supply of licorice. Outside, Lula, now the bandit's captive, awakens disoriented as she finds herself in an unfamiliar territory. Much to her relief, she encounters the store owner's son, so she asks him about her current location. Gladly, the man informs her that she's in the town of Sylvester, but his smile falters when Lula invites him to flee with her. Confused, he peeks into the store, only for him to realize that his father is held at gunpoint. Out of fear, the man quickly sprints away with Lula, and this distracts Bill. The store owner grabs his gun and shoots the outlaws in his store to buy his son time to escape. However, he takes time to reload, giving an infuriated Bill the chance to shoot him to his death. Bill then rushes outside to shoot the store owner's son, and to capture Lula. That night, at the ferry station, Jack awakens alone, which makes him feel alarmed for his sister's safety. He tries to look for her by shouting her name, hoping that it will reach her. Meanwhile, in Bill's camp, Lula asks the outlaw about where she'll take her, as she's worried that Jack will look for her. Bill lies that Jack has already perished during the encounter to discourage her. Untrusting her, Lula steals a gun and threatens to shoot Bill, but the outlaw is unfazed. She quickly retrieves the weapon from the teen's grasp and fires a warning shot to assert her dominance. The next day, Jack stumbles upon Eustace, a gravedigger, in town, and asks him about Bill's possible location. Eustace informs him that he has seen the gang ride north, so Jack becomes hopeful that he can still track them down. Once he sees the wagon, Jack asks if he can hitch a ride with him. Unfortunately, Eustace clarifies that he doesn't own the wagon but rather his partner, Reginald Jones. Speaking of Reginald, he informs the alderman, Bailey Mayfield, that they have accomplished their task of burying the deceased. Now, he expresses his desire to collect their $2 compensation, but Bailey believes that he deserves only $1. He jokes that Reginald's short stature makes him think he never contributed to the workload. However, Reginald is unimpressed with his teasing and firmly demands that he pay them. Bailey then suggests that he wear a dress and perform a dance to acquire the $2 compensation. Unamused, Reginald stabs Bailey's leg to weaken him and proceeds to choke him using the dress. Bailey attempts to shoot him, but Reginald unhands him by streaking his dagger on his forearm. With a gun in his hand, Reginald threatens Bailey's associates so that he can collect his compensation. Once Reginald leaves, Bailey angrily orders his associates to capture him. The group complies, but they're too late as Reginald already boards the wagon, all thanks to Eustace. As they escape the town, Jack appears from the wagon, surprising Reginald. Moments later, the group arrives at the mountains, and Jack requests Reginald's help to rescue Lula from Bill. To entice him, Jack reveals that Bill has a bounty of $10,000, and Eustace begins to consider his offer. He wants to divide the money equally between them, but Reginald is unenthusiastic, for he's opposed to returning to bounty hunting. While Reginald sets up his rifle to prevent their enemies from approaching, he asks Jack if he can use a gun. The teen denies it, which further makes Reginald hesitant to help him. At that moment, Reginald eliminates one of the thugs who is tailing them, which discourages the rest of the group from pursuing them. After this, Jack offers to pay him money to help him, but Eustace and Reginald refuse. On the road, Eustace discovers that Jack has stolen a horse from the thugs just to follow them, and he finds the man's persistence remarkable. That night, in Bill's camp, the outlaw orders Lula to disrobe because she insists that looking pretty in their travels isn't necessary. Though against her will, Lula obeys her, but she breaks down in tears due to Slim's ogling. Suddenly, Bill commands him to give his shirt to Lula, which removes the smugness from his face. Meanwhile, in Reginald's camp, Jack is deep asleep, so the man steals money from him. Eustace reprimands him for his behavior, but Reginald reasons that there's a posse after them, so it's best if they dispose of Jack, believing that he'll only be a burden. Contrary to this, Eustace advises him that they should accept Jack's offer, thinking that they have a good chance of defeating Bill. Since Reginald badly needs the money, he has no choice but to awaken Jack and make a deal with him. The next morning, Simon, one of the members of Bailey's posse, requests that he provide them with more money and weapons to catch Reginald. Unfortunately, Bailey doesn't have enough funds, so to convince Simon to continue the hunt, he grabs a sheriff's badge. He declares that Simon will be the new acting deputy of their town. One day, as Bill's gang resumes their travel, Lula requests that she allow her to relieve herself. As she proceeds with the deed, Lula accidentally grabs a thorny bush, for she needs to steady herself. Despite the pain, Lula ignores it and returns to the road, unaware that her bloody hand has left an imprint on the tree. That night, Slim, alongside Fatty, tries to take advantage of Lula, but the teen struggles against their grasp. The pair holds their ground, so Lula is compelled to grab an empty bottle of liquor and strike it against Slim's head. Because of the commotion, Bill emerges from her tent, and Slim tries to lie that he's only preventing Lula from escaping. Bravely, Lula informs her of Slim's true intentions, infuriating Bill. Hence, she grabs his crotch as punishment, which the other members find amusing. This time, Bill lies next to Lula to prevent those who dare to commit harm to her captive. The following morning, Simon and his brother, Malachi, discover Lula's bloody handprint. The pair uses it as evidence that someone has passed through the trail. In the town of Dahlia, Jack approaches Eustace and Reginald to ask if they have acquired any information about Bill's whereabouts. Eustace reveals that Bill and her gang left a day ago, but 2 of her members remained in the town. Now, Reginald advises that they visit the bars or brothels to find the said members. Shortly after, Jack visits a brothel, and he takes an interest in one of the courtesans who appears to be out of place. Hector, the manager, approaches him and warns him that the courtesan isn't ready yet. However, Jack clarifies that he isn't after the woman and stresses that he's looking for Fatty. To his dismay, Hector denies any knowledge about the outlaw's location. Jack thinks he's refusing to provide any information, so he decides to pretend that he'll be purchasing the courtesan's services. During his time with the courtesan, Jack inquires about her name, and she reveals that she's Jimmy Sue. Jack expresses that she doesn't belong in the brothel and believes that Hector only coerced her into such a line of work. Sue admits that she tried to escape from the establishment twice, but she failed. For this reason, Jack offers to help her, but Sue doubts his sincerity because the last man she trusted sold her to Hector. Moving on, Sue tries to resume her advances on Jack, but he stops her and convinces her to leave with him. Not long after, the pair rushes to the front door, but Hector blocks their way. The man is infuriated at Sue's boldness, so he drags her back into the establishment. Afterward, he reprimands Jack for trying to steal his courtesan, but the teen dismisses him. Before Jack can rescue Sue, Hector grabs him, causing a fight to ensue between them. Due to Jack's inexperience in fighting, Hector gets the advantage. Thinking he has subdued Jack, Hector grabs Sue and orders her to return to work. Unbeknownst to him, Jack has recovered a fire poker and uses it to strike him unconscious. Immediately, the pair escapes from the brothel and rushes to Reginald and Eustace, who are both waiting for him. Reginald wonders why he brought a courtesan with him, and Jack explains that Sue needs a ride to the train station. Changing the subject, Reginald asks if he has any information about Fatty, but Jack denies it. Sue recognizes his name and appearance, so she informs them that he's currently staying in a small shack in town. Meanwhile, Baldy thinks that Lula is trying to escape, so he orders her to return to their camp. However, Lula denies his allegations, but she's curious about where Bill is planning to take her. Baldy reveals that they'll head to the Thicket, which is a place they consider their home. This time, Lula asks why Bill has captured her, and Baldy discloses that there are other captives like her. According to him, Bill fulfills her wicked desires by cutting their faces and body. Therefore, Baldy advises Lula to go along with Bill's whims to keep herself safe. That night, in Fatty's shack, Reginald interrogates him about Bill's whereabouts, but the man denies any knowledge of it. Eustace quickly strikes him with his gun just to pressure him into admitting. Jack then takes his turn and asks him about the location where Bill will take Lula. Again, Fatty persistently denies any knowledge of Bill's plans, so Reginald orders Eustace to retrieve a nail. Since he won't cooperate, Jack and Eustace hold him down, whereas Reginald nails him to his seat. The outlaw passes out due to the intense pain, so Reginald proceeds to snoop into his belongings. He feels disappointed to learn that Bill's bounty is actually $1,000 alive and $300 dead. Realizing that they'll only gain a small fortune, Eustace and Reginald withdraw from the hunt. Jack tries to convince them to stay, and even offers not to take his part in the $1,000 bounty. Regardless, Reginald refuses to provide his service because he believes it's a losing proposition. Now alone with Sue, the pair decide to take matters into their own hands. Jack interrogates Fatty about Bill's whereabouts, promising him to summon a doctor to treat his injuries. Eventually, Fatty reveals that Bill and her gang are in a trading post near Livingston. At that moment, Jack discovers his family necklace on Fatty's neck, which was supposed to be owned by Lula. Enraged, Jack decides to abandon his promise and just leave him in a weakened state. Meanwhile, Lula hurriedly tries to flee from Bill's camp as Baldy's revelation terrifies her. Though she reaches a great distance, she bumps into a man, leaving her worried about her life. Thankfully, the man is none other than Simon, and he invites her into his camp with Malachi. She warns him of the dangers that loom in the woods, but Simon dismisses it, emphasizing that she's safe with them. Suddenly, a howling sound echoes through the forest, compelling Lula to run. Simon is alarmed at her behavior, so he tries to chase after her, only for him to be subdued by one of the bandits. Once he regains his balance, Simon searches for his gun, but Bill, with Lula taken as her captive, kicks him. Before they leave, Baldy ends Simon's life, frightening Malachi, who's hiding behind a tree. The following morning, Jack heads to Reginald's camp and offers to give him the land he'll inherit if he accompanies him in rescuing Lula. Because they never had a place of their own, Reginald and Eustace continue their allegiance with him. Later that day, at the trading post, Reginald trades Eustace's beads for a bottle of liquor, just to get a chance to interact with Bill. Curious about the newcomer, Bill emerges from the shadows and orders a drink from the trader. She then teases Reginald's physique, but the man takes no offense to that. Instead, he fights back by stressing that she has a peculiar face. Liking his grit, Bill even invites him to join her gang and turn him into a skilled gunslinger. After their brief interaction, Reginald pretends to be interested in knowing the trader. He lies that his name is Jack Parker, just to alert Lula, who's outside the store, that her brother is still alive and will rescue her. Moments later, Malachi grabs Sue from behind and threatens to shoot her if the group refuses to surrender Reginald. However, Reginald negotiates with him by inviting him to join his group, promising that he'll receive a share in Bill's bounty. Knowing Bailey doesn't compensate him enough, Malachi accepts his offer. Following this, Bill barges inside a church and confronts the priest, whom she recognizes. In the evening, at a hotel, Sue gives Jack a bath while she affirms her feelings for him. The next day, Reginald's group visits the local church, which Bill and her gang have burnt to a crisp. The priest, even though he's injured, greets the group, so Reginald inquires if he knows where Bill is headed. According to the priest, Bill will head to the Thicket, her gang's hideout that is concealed within the thick wilderness. He then warns them that Lula's life is beyond saving, as Bill has malicious urges that stem from her dark past. Back in Bill's childhood, her mother used to cut her face to vent out her resentment toward the men who took advantage of her. Until a time came that Bill couldn't endure the mistreatment, so she set their house on fire. On the day of their attack, the group goes into a position to ambush Bill and her gang. However, their plan is ruined when Malachi sneaks into the hideout after seeing his brother's killer, so he hopes to avenge him. He attempts to stab Baldy from behind, but the outlaw senses his presence, so he's able to dodge his attack. In the end, Baldy subdues Malachi and ends his life unremorsefully. Jack feels the need to rescue him, but Reginald prevents him from intervening because doing so would reveal their location. Just then, a gunshot echoes through the area as Sue fires at Baldy in an attempt to save Malachi. Without a choice, Eustace and Reginald decide to execute their plan immediately. As Reginald turns to leave, he orders Jack to stay, but the teen disobeys him and follows them to Bill's hideout. During a shootout, Bill calmly sharpens her knife and allows her members to take the fight. On the other hand, Lula quickly tries to escape from the cabin, but Bill captures her. Jack realizes that they're missing, so the stubborn teen follows their trail, even if Reginald attempts to stop him. In Sue's location, she encounters one of Bill's men, prompting her to shoot him. Even with the fatal injury, the man remains unshaken, and he even disarms her. When the man tries to tackle her, Sue fights back and overpowers him. Getting the upper hand, Sue proceeds to punch him, but the man stabs her, ending her life. Meanwhile, as Jack deals with Bill, Eustace accompanies Reginald, who's positioning himself behind his rifle. Suddenly, they hear the other outlaws approaching their location, so Eustace volunteers to eliminate them. Now, as Jack faces Bill, the outlaw shoots him twice, subduing him. Worried, Lula rushes to his side, but Bill warns her that Jack will soon perish. Angered, Lula tackles her and proceeds to punch her, releasing her pent-up resentment. Eventually, Bill recovers and restrains Lula, threatening to end her life. Before Bill can accomplish it, Reginald shoots her, and the woman breathes her last by calling out to her mother. Relieved, Lula reunites with Jack, but her momentary happiness ends as he perishes due to blood loss. Similarly, Reginald finds a dying Eustace propped against a tree, making him mournful. Reginald expresses his regret for pursuing Bill, but Eustace thinks they did the right thing. On the same day, Reginald and Lula deliver Bill's head to the local sheriff to collect their compensation. To their surprise, the sheriff gives them $10,000 as Bill's offenses are too severe. After splitting the money, Lula invites Reginald to accompany her to Montana and manage the land, as he's the only person she knows. A few years later, Lula visits Jack's grave and pays her respect. She then returns home, where Reginald warmly welcomes her inside.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.